Welcome to the Selling from the Heart podcast on the Salescast Network. You've joined a global movement of sales professionals who are dedicated to being authentic and building trust. We call it Selling from the Heart. Together, we are on a mission to bring sincerity and substance to the sales profession we all love. Get ready to be inspired and equipped as we join our hosts, Larry Levine and Darrell Amy.
Great news! The Selling from the Heart book has been picked up by a New York publishing house and is now on the Barnes & Noble website. To help fuel the growth in our movement of authenticity, it'd be awesome to get the book not just on the website, but also on the shelves of Barnes & Noble stores. To do this, we need to demonstrate how popular this book is by pre-ordering as many copies as possible. To thank you for helping me with this huge goal, when you pre-order the book on barnesandnoble.com, I will say thank you with over $250 in special bonus items. To get started, please pre-order Selling from the Heart on the barnesandnoble.com website. Then go to sellingfromtheheart.net/book to learn more about how to get your special bonus items. Thank you for your support as we continue to build this movement of authenticity inside the sales profession.
Hello and welcome back to Selling from the Heart. Your co-host, Darrell Amy, here today with Larry Levine. What's going on, Larry?
What isn't going on, Darrell? Here we are. We're smack dab in the middle of summer. It's hot August nights going on. We got a lot happening here at Selling from the Heart.
This is such a fun time. And as this is coming out, Larry, we are here. We're finally here. This coming week is the official relaunch of Selling from the Heart. You got picked up by a New York publisher, like we're talking about. The movement's growing, and these you can still pre-order this book at barnesandnoble.com, as we've been talking about. Larry, it is so exciting. Congratulations. August 15th is a big day here at Selling from the Heart. And I just want to say this week, we're going to have a lot of celebrations coming up. If you're listening in the week of August 15th here in 2023, just look, we're going to have a great time, and just hats off. I'm so excited for you. This is a huge moment in the movement at Selling from the Heart.
No, it is. And, I pinch myself and I go, man, when I decided it was time after you convinced me to write the book, who would have thought 5 years later, here we are. Special shout out to our publisher at Morgan James, David Hancock. You and your team are absolutely amazing. What you did with Selling from the Heart is just wow, 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 and wow.
You're going to want to get your hands on this. It's a beautiful new edition. I got one right here. It's fantastic. It's got that. It's reformatted. It's got some new stuff in it, and you're really going to enjoy it. But if you will join us in pre-ordering this book, sellingfromtheheart.net/pre-order, we still have $300 worth of goodies if you can sneak in before August 15th. So big shout out. Thank you to everybody who's supporting the pre-launch of Selling from the Heart. And one of the biggest aspects of Selling from the Heart is a heart-centered sales professional is dedicated to always making themselves better. And today's guest is all about that, all about making yourself better. We're in for a great conversation today, Larry.
Yes, we are. You got to welcome in Jonathan here pretty quick, dude.
Yeah, well, Jonathan Mahan is the co-founder of the Practice Lab, the first ever training community for sellers ready to develop their skills like athletes, musicians, and performers. An athlete, a musician, and performer doesn't just get there. They don't just walk out on stage. They practice. And that's what the Practice Lab does. They help salespeople cut through the clutter of tips and tactics to learn the most impactful core sales behavior that makes selling feel good and net them meaningful results. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. Jonathan, welcome to Selling from the Heart. It's great to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. Looking forward to the chat.
We've been looking forward to it. Great seeing you.
Yeah, this is going to be wonderful. And as we get started, Jonathan, the question that every guest on the Selling from the Heart podcast answers, and that is, Jonathan, what does it mean to you to sell from the heart?
Yeah, that was a fun question to think about. Of course, the first answer that comes to mind is just, a type of selling where you really, really care, right? Care about the people you're working with, about helping them rather than just being focused on the money. But I'm actually going to take a slightly different angle because I imagine it's probably everybody's answer. So another thing that came to mind when I thought about selling from the heart is kind of how that's different from selling from the mind, right? Or selling from the brain, because I actually naturally as a seller take a bit more of a logical approach where it's all scientific, and I may be testing messaging, and I'm like, developing a consistent process where I know in call one, these are the questions I got to ask. And in call two, these are the questions I ask. And that tends to be my natural bent. And there's real value to that. And that is really selling from the brain. But I've actually, just from working with a lot of sellers, started to realize how many sellers don't do a lot of that. They do more of the selling from the heart, where it's more of an intuitive process where you couldn't take their process and have another rep do it, because their process is built around who they are as a human. And even to an extent, each sales process is different based on the buyer they're working with. Because again, their sales process is all based on who that buyer is as a human and meeting their needs. So it ends up looking very different, from one sale to the next. And it ends up being a bit more of an artistic endeavor rather than a scientific endeavor, right? Guided more by intuition rather than by, rigid processes. So I naturally do more of that selling from the brain, but I'm starting to learn the real value of selling from the heart in a more intuitive, artistic way rather than a scientific approach to sales.
Oh, hey, Darrell, this is good stuff, Jonathan, because, it's rare. And I don't think we've ever heard it say selling from the brain. So that was kind of different, because there was a couple episodes ago, Jonathan, this is hilarious. Darrell said selling from the can. So we've had selling from the brain, selling from the heart, and selling from the
selling
can.
from a can.
But no, in all seriousness, I think it's an art blend. And we have to be, as sellers, we have to be cognizant. We have to blend what's going on in our mind to what's going in with our heart. And that's a thing for a lot of people to do, because the sellers, it's always right. We've been all this about mindset, but it's mindset combined with heart set. And I think it's going to distinguish a sales professional from a sales rep.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Jonathan. I lean towards being strategic and selling with the mind, and I'm discovering that the foundation of trust, it combines authentic relationship, the heart side of things, with meaningful value, the mind side of things. And to get there requires practice. And we've said this all along at Selling from the Heart is core to the book and is core to our beliefs, that if you really give a rip about your clients and your prospects, you need to show up ready, and that requires practice. So unpack for us, when you think about the importance of practice inside selling, why is it so important, and why is it from your perspective, such a high leverage thing for sales professionals to invest their time doing?
I think that lazy selling can be done really without much practice, without much skill. You can just kind of like show up and talk about your product and try to get somebody to buy it, and then send them follow-up emails for the next 6 months. And unfortunately, that's a lot of the way that people sell, certainly early in the career, but a lot of people keep doing that throughout their career. The kind of selling that you guys talk about, right, that I embrace, the selling from the heart, this really like client-centric selling, that requires a really high degree of skill. To truly do selling really well, you have to be a master of a lot of very, very difficult mental, emotional, social type skills and processes, right? So things like, reading emotion and having a highly tuned in sense of empathy, being deeply curious, right? Being able to manage your own emotions, being able to influence the emotions of others, right? Being able to, ride that nice delicate balance between, attachment to the outcome and really focusing and working hard towards your goals, at the same time without being too attached that you become desperate. There's like a lot of mental gymnastics and emotional gymnastics you have to do. Some of that work is internal, but a lot of that work is interpersonal, such as, again, deeply listening to someone, hearing the things that they aren't saying, but reading between the lines correctly. That's really, really difficult stuff to do. You can't just will yourself to do that. You just can't read a book that talks about how important listening is, and suddenly, boom, in the middle of a high pressure conversation, your brain is actually listening better.
Yeah.
And in the same way that I can't watch a YouTube video about backflips and expect my body to know what a backflip feels like and be able to do it, I can't read or watch a YouTube video on how important curiosity is and suddenly magically have a more curious brain that notices things I used to not notice. You can't do that, right? So if you're doing really high quality good selling, the type of selling that, I imagine most listeners of the show aspire to, that requires intense amounts of skill. And just to clarify here, right, when I say skill, I'm not just talking about like knowledge that you have about how to do things better. It's really skill is like things that you can do, abilities that you have, things your brain is able to pull off consistently, even under pressure, right? Those are skills. So, because I know a lot of times in the world of, all training, but certainly sales training, we kind of talk about knowledge and skills interchangeably. But in my world, those are very different things, right? Knowledge is simply knowledge, knowing that, hey, this is what good selling looks like. And that is the starting point. But I think we've all experienced filling our head with knowledge and then getting on a real sales call and just continuing to sell the way we've always sold, wondering, dang, why didn't anything change? I read that book. Why am I still selling the way I used to sell? Yeah. And it's because knowledge isn't enough. You need skill. And again, skill refers to the abilities that your brain actually has. So practice, of course, is the most effective way to grow skill in a short amount of time. Specifically, if you're doing the kind of practice that like Olympic athletes and professional sports teams do, which research is called deliberate practice. That has been shown to by far be the fastest way to grow skill and ultimately change people's abilities of what they can do when handle under pressure.
I know we're going to get into a fascinating conversation, and I'm all about practice. And what's interesting is I remember this was a long, long time ago as I was writing Selling from the Heart. I happened to pay attention, Jonathan, to a social post, and the social post went something like this. And I can't remember because it was a long time ago, but it was basically what sport closely resembles sales? And to my smart aleck response was, I don't think there's any sport that resembles sales until salespeople and sales leaders understand what it means to practice, plan, and prepare for their day. It's hard to make that comparison. Mm-hmm. And I love that you use deliberate practice, because ask a salesperson to practice on a regular basis, and it's like pulling hair or like pulling teeth. I mean, walk us through this when you mean deliberate practice. And I really want us to focus in on this, because deliberate practice requires intention. Yeah. It really does. And, walk us through your whole model and your philosophy as it relates to deliberate practice. I'm just curious, where do you go with this?
Yeah. So I think the key insight here is to recognize that repetition alone doesn't grow skill. Because a lot of times when people say like practice or role play in a sales context, all they're doing is just simple repetition, where it's like, okay, well, let's sit down in a room. I'll pretend I'm the buyer, you pretend to the seller. I'll hit you with an objection to respond to it. Great. Same time, same place. Let's do the same thing next week. And it's just simple repetition. And there's some benefit to repetition early on, specifically, right? If you're like a brand new to sales, but after a certain point, it stops paying off. A good example of this is if you look at people's ability to drive and drive well. Simple repetition when you're 16 years old will get you from a hazard on the road to, okay, you can do this. But it really doesn't get you past that. Past probably age 18, I don't think people's driving abilities get any better, right? Whether you're 50, 40, 30, or 60, most people's driving abilities is about the same. The countless hours and hours and hours and hours in the car doesn't actually make people better drivers, because they're just kind of going through the motions. It's simple repetition. So a lot of times when people think about sales role plays, they're picturing, and what they've done in the past was simple repetition, which was awkward, it was uncomfortable, and didn't really feel like it made them any better. So that's why people don't like doing it, right? However, when you use deliberate practice, you're applying intention and focus in a way that allows the practice to actually make you better and grow skill. Right. It's crazy to think though, but especially depending on how old you are, many people have as many hours logged in the car as professional musicians have with their instrument. And yet clearly professional musicians tend to handle their instruments better than most people handle their cars. Right. It's because professional musicians were using focused, deliberate practice to get better versus drivers, which were just doing simple repetition. So
yeah. Oh, so powerful. And this is, so I am, my 19-year-old is about to be a sophomore, and he's in the music program, plays French horn, very complex instrument. I've watched him, from those early days in middle school. And I say watched, I've listened to him. So I've listened to him for the early days in middle school, all the way up now to where he is, was National Youth Orchestra. He's working towards literally being a professional musician. And what I've recognized about that, and you put him next to a middle school or high school player, what's different between him and that average, I'll say generously, player? Practice. I mean, it's hours and hours of practice. And I think this is where, as sales professionals and also our sales leader friends that are listening in, we all got into sales because we want to make a difference and we want to make a very generous, awesome living doing it, no differently than, as someone in professional sports, no differently than somebody that's an actor or a musician. And yet just having the title sales on your business card or on your LinkedIn profile doesn't mean you're going to hit that, top tier of earning potential. And I see the difference between that average earning and that top earning, no different than a golfer, no different than a football player, no different than a French horn player, that difference being practice. And this is why I think what we're talking about here is such a force multiplier for everybody listening in and such a game changer. So practice, this is what happens. What happens when you don't practice? I just want to flip this thing on its head. Like, what can you expect when you don't practice? Because let's just be honest, that's what 80% of sales professionals do. We think we got a good personality. We can wing it. What happens to sales professionals when we neglect practice?
Generally, not much. Not much changes. Like if you want to know the future of a sales professional who doesn't practice, just look at their past. The future's probably going to look like the exact same.
Yeah.
Nothing really changes too much. Whereas with deliberate practice, again, that's when you can really change the wiring in your brain, change the abilities that you have, change the level of skill you have, which means you can actually change your behavior. And, it's interesting. You mentioned salespeople saying we can just wing it. A lot of people who talk about that are keying into something very important, which is that, sales conversations are highly unpredictable. You can't script them and rehearse them. And oftentimes, if you try to stick to a script too closely, it doesn't work out well. It would have been better if you just freestyled it. But freestyling it in the moment doesn't mean you're not preparing in advance. Hell, I just used the term freestyling. So think about like freestyle rappers. Obviously, there's no script there. They're not rehearsing. They are truly freestyling. However, the great ones spend hours and hours and hours in practice to improve their brain, to sharpen their brain, to sharpen their abilities so that when it comes time to freestyle, they can actually do it well. So in sales, you can think of the same way, right? Practice in sales doesn't have to be, here's what I'm going to say. Here's exactly the script I'm going to follow, right? Practice in sales can involve just training your brain to be a sharper, more responsive, more agile, more curious, more empathetic brain, trusting that once you have that upgraded hardware, you're going to perform better in your calls, even if you're doing them entirely unscripted. So
I love it.
There is certainly a version of practicing where you do rehearse specific questions in advance and specific, demo motions in advance. There's a place for that, but it doesn't have to just be that, right? You can practice just the underlying brain abilities, and then you can continue to keep winging it on every call, but spending lots of time preparing in advance so that, you get better and better at winging it with time.
So good. And Larry, this is great. I knew this was going to be amazing. And, I want to continue this conversation here in just a moment about how do you actually practice? What does deliberate practice look like? And before we take a quick break to hear from our sponsor and we're also going to hear from one of our good friends, Tia Graham. Tia is an alumni of the Selling from the Heart podcast, and she's going to answer what it means to sell from the heart. And by the way, if you'd like to be featured this fall on an upcoming Selling from the Heart podcast, and you want to send in a video of what it means to you to sell from the heart, just text the word video to 21,000. That's video to 21,000. And it'll give you simple instructions on how you can submit your video. So we're back with Jonathan Mahan in just a minute after a word from our sponsors and our good friend, Tia Graham. Darrell here, and I'm excited to share with you one of the most innovative tools we've come across in a long time. Our partners at Why Institute have developed an amazing platform that helps people discover their why operating system. It's truly amazing. In 10 minutes or less, you can know why you do what you do, how you bring your why to life, and what people can count on from you. It's truly the first step in self-awareness. If you're a coach or a sales leader who believes in helping your people understand who they are so they can be the best version of themselves, you've got to check this out. All you need to do is go to whyinstitute.com and look for the Why certification page. We'll put the link in the show notes. When you reach out to the Why Institute, let them know you heard about it here on Selling from the Heart, and you'll be on your way to helping your team discover what drives them.
What it means to me is really, truly believing that what I'm selling is helping people and having this trust inside myself that it might not be for every single person or every single company, but I know the value that is in it. And with that trust and with that belief that I can help people, then you're selling with the heart.
I love Tia. She's so awesome. Great. What a gem. And once again, if you want to submit a video, just text the word video to 21,000. You can answer what it means to sell from the heart. We're here today with Jonathan Mahan, co-founder of the Practice Lab, and we're having this incredible conversation about the importance of practice in selling. So, and by the way, we're recording this. It's coming up. This is coming out in August, and I hope my college football team is practicing. I hope they're not going to go out and wing it, because if they do, we're going to have a season like, well, we've had the last 10 years. But nonetheless, I digress. Practice. So deliberate practice. What is that? And how is deliberate practice different from regular practice?
Yeah, I can be able to work in an answer of your college football team here. What's interesting about, competitive sports is that in general, especially when you get into professional leagues, most teams practice a similar amount of time, right? It's not like one team is practicing 2 hours a week and someone else is practicing 200 hours a week. It's probably pretty similar how much time is spent in practice. But of course, some teams perform far better than others. So right there, we can recognize that there's not all practice is created equal. And as I mentioned earlier, simple repetition doesn't tend to grow skill. So if your whole approach to football practice is, all right, folks, we're going to play a mock game. You have for one team, you have for another team, go play football. All right, good work. We're going to do the same thing tomorrow. No one's going to get any better. They're just going to make more permanent the current way they play.
Right.
Similarly, in sales, if your approach to practice is, all right, folks, you all be the buyers, you be the customers, hit them with some objections, do your best responding. Great work. We're going to do the same thing tomorrow. No one gets any better. All that happens is that whatever their current way of handling objections is becomes more permanent. So for deliberate practice, right, to be the way you do things, there's some hallmarks for what makes deliberate practice different. First one is that with deliberate practice, you're very clear going into it what good looks like and what you're trying to do here, right? So it's not just, I'll hit you with an objection, you send me a response back. It's, all right, so when you respond to an objection, here's 3 elements that need to be present, okay? Make sure you get to these 3 points. Now I'm going to hit you with an objection, and now you can have a chance to respond because you know going into it what you're aiming for, what the target is, so that after you've done your practice, you can reflect and analyze, how close did I get? Where did I miss the mark? What needs to change? And that's another hallmark of deliberate practice, that with deliberate practice, the feedback isn't saved for the end. This is the thing that drives me crazy. Even when I did role plays in the past with the manager, they'd have you do your thing. They'd load you up with a list of half a dozen pieces of feedback, and then it's okay, next. In which case, what are you really supposed to do with that feedback? How's it supposed to help you? With deliberate practice, the feedback goes in the middle, not at the end. So you try it out, then you get some feedback with how your performance compared against that standard that you agreed in advance you were aiming for. Then you have a chance to take that feedback, implement it immediately, and try again. And in some cases, you can do this multiple times in a row, right? Where you keep doing feedback, another attempt, feedback, another attempt. And therefore, you keep getting better with time. Each attempt gets just a little bit better, a little bit closer to the mark.
I'm enjoying this because I love every aspect of practice. Darrell and I we live, sleep, and breathe practice. But I got to go back to tying in professional sports just for a moment. But there's a point behind this: is if we sat down and we had a professional head coach, insert whatever sports field they're in, and they were on this podcast with us, and we talked about deliberate practice, they'd have a smile on their face and they'd be chiming in. They'd be I'm all about this, guys. But here's where I'm going to go with this, Jonathan, because a vast majority of our listeners and the people that watch the podcast are sales leaders. So speak to sales leaders for just a moment, Jonathan, and said, this is the importance of deliberate practice. This is what you can expect as a sales leader by implementing deliberate practice. Walk us through that.
I would ask you to imagine, if you're a sales leader, a scenario that I'm sure everyone's gone through. And that is, you run a training with your team. This could be something you run. This could be something your enablement person runs, or even an outside consultant. But you run a training with your team, and you love the training. The team loves the training because they're training all the right stuff, and they're explaining it really well, and your reps are understanding it, and you're seeing that it clicked with them. And you're feeling pretty pumped and excited about how good this training went. And then 2 weeks later, you're doing call reviews, and you're noticing, hey, wait a minute. no one's actually implementing anything that we learned in the training. They're just continuing to sell the way they always sold. And you're left wondering, what the hell was the point of that training then? Was that just entertainment? Was that just team building? Like, why did we do that training? Why did we give all these people these wonderful aha moments of, oh my God, these trainers are brilliant, if everyone just went back to selling the way they always sold anyways? So the promise of deliberate practice is that it is the vehicle by which you can take the theory that you filled your reps' heads with over and over again and start to see actual behaviors change. Because that's really what the power of practice is that it rewires the brain, it equips people with more skill they haven't had before, and new patterns in the brain that they can easily call on under pressure when they need them most, which is where, traditional training lacks, right? Traditional training, it fills your head with knowledge, but in the moment, when the pressure's on, you don't have time to think. Hold that knowledge is almost like locked away in a part of your brain that you can't access. And all you can access in the moment is the default grooves that you're used to using, right? So practice basically takes that knowledge and brings it into a part of the brain that's actually accessible under pressure during a performance when it matters most. So you still got to make sure you're practicing the right stuff, right? But deliberate practice can actually really change behaviors and get your team to actually start selling differently than what they used to do.
Powerful and so effective. And, as you're talking about this in the context of sales leaders developing their team, I'm just thinking about the college football team. I mean, there is a head coach for sure, but you have other people the head coach isn't running every practice. They may be out there with the clipboard, but you got the quarterback coach, tight end coach, all of the receivers coach, and they're running the drills. They're running the practice. And this is so powerful because when that game happens and when the pressure's on and 100,000 people are looking at you screaming and someone comes out and runs at you blind side or comes, the play breaks up. And this is sales all the time, right? It's like you said, it's never, they're going to say this, then you say this, and it's never that. But if you're practiced, you can flip the play right away and boom, you're ready to go. And this is such an incredibly powerful thing. And I just want to say, I'm excited for you. I'm so glad that you started the practice lab. And just here in the last few minutes, tell us about the vision for the practice lab and what you're putting together.
Really what we set out to do and what we're in the process of doing now is taking this approach of deliberate practice, which has been well documented from, martial artists to sports teams to actors to musicians to chess players, and basically bringing it to the world of sales so that sales teams can engage in the same regular practice that sports teams do or that, theater groups do, so that selling can actually start to change, right? Because again, so much money gets spent on sales training, which really at the end of the day is just team building and entertainment because people keep selling the way they've always sold, even after the trainings. So practice can be that vehicle by which you get salespeople to actually change and really start to elevate the profession. Because to do really good selling, the type of selling that I imagine all three of us want to be doing and want to see the world doing, again, requires a very high degree of skill. And we haven't been fair to salespeople by expecting them to pull off this, judo level mental, emotional, psychological behaviors without ever equipping them with the skill and giving them a chance to grow the skill to do those things. All we do is we paint a picture of the theory for them and then just expect them to go out there, which again is no more fair than being in a gymnastics troupe and just having them watch videos all day about how to do gymnastics and not letting them practice. It's the same idea. So that's what we're working on, is really bringing this approach to sales teams. So sales teams can start behaving more like sports teams, right? And the way that they focus on growing skill.
I same here, Darrell. I totally agree. And y'all know I'm a sports junkie. Again, I'm going to throw a stake in the ground on a sports analogy. There is no professional head coach out there that I know of, nor college, right? And I don't care, D1, D2, D3, it doesn't really matter. That's going to send their players, he or she, out on the field to say, go get them. Yeah. Right. We're not going to practice this. Go get them. But yet, this happens on a daily basis inside the sales world. Blows my mind that we allow, as sales leaders, we allow our salespeople to go out in the field and expect to achieve and overachieve results month in and month out, quarter in and quarter out without any practice. I'm not talking about occasional. I'm talking about everyday consistent practice. That's what I love about your message, Jonathan.
Yeah. Here's a fun thought experiment that I've done in the past, and I think would be really beneficial for sales leaders and even individual sales reps. So imagine that they turn selling into an Olympic sport, and the U.S. spins up an Olympic selling team.
Mm-hmm.
How would that team spend their time? And this obviously includes practice, but it probably goes beyond practice, right? They'd probably spend time in like physical health and mental and emotional health and sleep, right? And stuff like that. They'd be spending their time on, delegating their time between activities like prospecting and follow-ups and holding new calls. They'd be spending their time watching recordings and doing kind of game tape review. They'd certainly be spending time practicing core fundamental skills that they need to have. But really just think to yourself, if they made some Olympic sport, how would they spend their time? And then ask yourself, why wouldn't I spend my time that way? Or why wouldn't my team spend their time that way? Like, we get paid a fair amount and we get paid a heck of a lot more when we perform well. Mm-hmm. There's a lot on the line for us. Why wouldn't we take this seriously, right? Or a slightly more jabbing question to ask yourself is, if you have kids, how much time do my kids spend practicing their hobbies, right? How much time does my daughter spend practicing gymnastics? How much time does my son spend practicing guitar? And then ask yourself, why can I, as a professional salesperson, not practice my craft at least as long as my 5-year-old daughter practices her craft?
All right. You crossed the line, Jonathan. It's getting a little too close to home now.
You're speaking the truth on that. And that's right. Just, you got to say it because the truth has to be told.
That's right.
Without practice, your salespeople can never get any better than there are.
That's right.
End of story.
Jonathan, this has been a very challenging and personally convicting conversation now. Thank you so much for sharing time with us. How can folks get more Jonathan Mahan in their lives?
Yeah, so probably the only social platform I'm active on is LinkedIn. So you can find the link for that in the show notes, I'm sure. And then our website to learn about our company is thepracticelab.co. It's not .com. That's a totally different business.
So .co. Cool. That's right.
.co is what you're looking for. So that's where you can learn about us. And, you can certainly contact us there, right, as a form on the webpage if you want to learn about, bringing practice to your team. But additionally, anybody listening to this, whether you're a sales leader or rep or anyone else in the world of sales who wants to actually experience this type of practice firsthand to see what it feels like and how it's different from simple repetition, we actually have a monthly meetup we call the Practice Club, where anyone in sales, from individual contributors to leadership and management, can come once a month and actually practice a core fundamental selling skill that they can take immediately with them into their real world. So to sign up for the Practice Club, you can go to thepracticelab.co/club and sign up there. It's totally free. We meet up the first Wednesday of each month, and we kind of rotate through a handful of different topics, from top of funnel stuff to like mid funnel demo skills to like end of funnel kind of like negotiation, objection handling skills. So we'd love to see some of these folks who listen to this in practice there with us.
Oh, this is good stuff. Jonathan, you're awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the conversation, guys. It's been fun.
You got it, man. Keep it up. Great work. Larry, that's fun. Now,
that was right in the wheelhouse, Darrell. That was good. Right in the wheelhouse.
Now, keep in mind, Jonathan said the Practice Club, not the Breakfast Club. So I tell you what, I will tell you this, full on honesty on this moment. That was floating through my head because why did you go there? But that's what I was thinking, Jonathan. Sorry, I was thinking Breakfast Club the whole time. But so the net of this is, do you want to be in the Practice Club or do you want to be in the Breakfast Club?
and it's not detention.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know what? Here's the deal, though. And I mean, this is super. The practice thing, and of course, you just go, okay. Practice. Who needs practice? It's about the game, right? Famous video. But the reality of this is, let's talk to our sales leaders for a minute. And this one hits close to home. I mean, if you have a professional coach that doesn't practice with their team and do a good job of that, how long are they going to be a coach?
Yep.
They're going to get, axed and moved on. And same goes for all sales professionals out there. If we don't practice, we're up against someone who does. And look, if football analogy, if you're a team and you're a player that hasn't practiced and you stand across the line from another monstrous human being that has practiced, it's going to be really painful. Yeah. You're just not going to win. And so I'm super thankful for Jonathan pushing us on this around practice. And this is such a core part of sales professionals that want to do well, but also give a rip. Practice because you want to do the right thing for your prospects and clients.
No, absolutely. And, I throw a stab at it in Selling from the Heart. And I just say sales professionals do the things that sales reps find excuses for.
Mm-hmm.
And practice is one thing that a sales professional will hold in high regards. Great stuff, Darrell. Absolutely great stuff with Jonathan.
Well, thank you to everybody who's listening in. Make sure to like or subscribe if you're new around here. We're glad you're here. You don't want to miss any episodes coming up throughout the rest of this summer on into the fall. Huge shout out to everybody supporting the relaunch of Selling from the Heart by ordering the book at barnesandnoble.com and then going to sellingfromtheheart.net/pre-order to snag your goodies for cheering this on. Larry, this is such an exciting time. We are leading a movement of authenticity in the sales profession. If you're listening, you're part of it.
Absolutely. And again, Darrell and I, we're super grateful to everyone who's joining this movement. It's, without you guys, none of this happens.
That's right.
So it's not the practice club. It's not the breakfast club. And it's not the Selling from the Heart club. It's just, thank you so much for joining us on this movement. I appreciate you.
Yeah. And until next time, keep being genuine, keep being authentic, keep building trust, make deliberate practice a priority. And most of all,
sell from the heart.